It's been asked early on why the Woodland Trust is involved, because basically this route that's been chosen doesn't go through any land that we own. We have no significant information about it damaging any of our land. But the problem is, as you can see from this simple graphic that we put together, 21 ancient woods are going to be damaged by the first route. Still up for consultation, 12 ancient woods directly destroyed by the second part of the route. As an organisation, the Woodland Trust stands for no further loss of ancient woodland. Therefore, we were left with no option but to take part in this campaign. So we did put a proposal together and put this to our trustees and to our management board, and it was seen as categorically correct that the Woodland Trust needed to lead a campaign around doing the best we could to stop this loss. Ancient woodland is really important, continuously wooded since 1600, as you can see, high level of species that are important to us, but most importantly of all, you can't recreate it, you can't move it, it's completely irreplaceable. So it's a really rare habitat that you can't change. So what we did was, 2 years ago, we started to ask some questions. I just want to show you this small film that will show you where we started from and our starting point.
Ancient woodland is one of our richest land-based wildlife habitats. It covers only 2% of the UK's land area and is home to many rare and threatened species. Because ancient woodland has been stable over a long period of time, it's developed many complex interactions between the species that exist there. New planting sites are often ploughed beforehand and have a mixed soil layer with less diversity of fungi and bacteria within it. This supports less plant species, and with the saplings being young, they don't provide the shade that gives the many different microhabitats that you find in an ancient woodland. Many ancient woodlands are small and fragmented, so the effect of putting a train line through one of them will break it into smaller fragments. When you isolate a woodland, the species within it can't disperse to other woodlands. Limited strip planting along the side of the railway won't link into existing networks. It's important to link up the woodlands that exist. Tree planting is likely to take place along the side of the line, but it's important that the species chosen are the right ones. Native species of local stock are better for biodiversity, but everybody knows that trees on the line can cause problems with train. The bigger the leaf, the more problems it might cause, so it's quite easy to think that conifers will be planted, but there aren't many conifers native to the UK, so we'd like to know what's going to happen here. The stated width of the track will be a minimum 22 metres, but this is likely to be slightly wider in places because of the work that will go on during construction. There'll be extra, probably temporary land take during construction work, and when this goes through an ancient woodland, that's actually going to cause a lot of damage. Many large areas will require the track to be in a cutting, to cut down noise, to cut down visual intrusion, but also to keep the track level. When it's in a cutting, this will widen the land take to an unknown extent. This is an embankment cutting through an ancient woodland, showing just how much could be lost should the track need to be raised on an embankment. Like a cutting, the area is likely to be grassed to keep the trees further back and lower maintenance costs. The ancient woodland would be significantly affected by this embankment being placed there. As you can see, a bored tunnel has very little effect on the ancient woodland. There'll be two small openings which will probably be outside the ancient woodland, and so there won't be any land loss. Our only concern here would be if ventilation shafts need to be drilled up through the woodland, and that would cause some ancient woodland loss. Green tunnels. Should these be placed where there's ancient woodland, we think these will actually be as destructive as a normal cutting. It's very unlikely that woodland could be planted over the top of the green tunnel. Therefore, this grassed area will still be a barrier. Cut and cover tunnel. A cutting that could go through an ancient woodland, which has a roof put on it. There's been no information to say what will happen to this roof, but at best it might have a turf roof, again fragmenting the ancient woodland, causing a loss of habitat and isolating the species on either side. So these are the questions still to be answered about High Speed 2. We hope that these answers will come sooner rather than later.
So the idea of that film was just for us to outline exactly what our concerns were, and we made the film 2 years ago. And sadly, as the end of that was that we were hoping these answers would come soon, we've still not received those answers. So, at the same time, all of you were also not receiving any answers. That became very clear as you were phoning us and saying, what's going to happen to these ancient woods that are sat within our communities? So it became very apparent that it was time for us to put our money where our mouth was and to create something for you all to be able to use. So we have created the Toolkit for Communities, and this relates to ancient woods, trees and wildlife, and how this route is going to affect them. We have used our own specialist conservationists, and we've also brought in extra pairs of hands to be able to write this efficiently and effectively very quickly for you. You can download it for free from our website. You can also get your copy here today, and we'll have copies that we can give as you're leaving today. But basically what this is your guide to be able to hold those conversations in community forums with your MP as you go into different meetings or with different groups. It's your crib sheet, it's your information that you need to know how to hold conversations around why these ancient woods should not be being lost and should not be sat in direct route for this train route. It's really quite complicated, and as Guy was just saying, conservationists talk in lots of different languages and ways. What we've done is we've deliberately taken this down a peg or two so that any of us can pick this up. I am not a conservationist, I am a campaigner. I understand it, so you stand a chance. So what we've done is we brought in an illustrator so that we could start to draw out and help people understand what it is that makes up an ancient woodland. And the bit that's really important, you'll find this in the toolkit a little bit clearer, is that it is undisturbed and not modified by modern agricultural soils. The fact that they're undisturbed is absolutely vital, and that's why they're irreplaceable. You can't say, oh, it's okay, which apparently has appeared in a couple of conversations with High Speed 2, in about 25 years, it'll all look like it did last time. Well, it might physically look like there's trees in the ground, but that will be the end of it. It will be an illusion. You cannot recreate ancient woodland. It holds lots of really amazing archaeological features, and also the species that will be in there will be very dependent on the area that that ancient woodland has grown up in and where it's developed. It's really each one is unique. We fight ancient woodland threat the length and breadth of the UK. We've got over 800 cases, woods under threat on our database at the moment. And so we know that everyone is completely unique and different. So you have to stick to these principles. It's back to what Guy was saying. Stick to the science of these principles as what is there, and that is what helps. So just also to take you through in a little bit more detail, the document also includes fragmentation. Now, this drawing's great, and you saw Christina, who was on the film, do the same thing. And it explains how you have a core area, a dark area, and that's like the best place if you're a species to be living. That's the really important part that needs protecting and caring for. And if we're going to start seeing destruction through the centre, they may be able to say, well, there's wood on one side, wood on the other, it'll be okay. But it stops species being able to move from side to side. It is a barrier. Just because there's air above it does not mean they're going to sit and wait like there's a little crossing and go over to the other side. It's a fantasy to think of it in that way. This is a true barrier that will sit between some of our most important ancient woods. As we hold these discussions with High Speed 2, you also need to be talking to them about measures to reverse the fragmentation. So if this does go forward, looking at how you can plant buffering areas, where you can do restoration of different pieces of work. It's really important to be having constructive conversations, because that's the compensation they should be doing, that they're obliged to do. If they continue with this, they have to do the right compensation for the environment. So you need to drive home in your discussions with them exactly what the expectation is of them if this is truly going to be an exemplar piece of engineering. We know from our work, the Wildlife Trust know from their work, biodiversity is in decline. That is what was released recently. But best practice shows that planning policy, there should be an ecological best practice. There should be a mitigation hierarchy applied, and this is what we use when we fight our cases all the time. The first is, can you avoid it completely? We don't know if we can avoid it completely because we've only been given one route to look at. So we've not been given a fair crack at looking at the mitigation hierarchy before we can even move on to any further consultation or discussions with them. So it's really important that we have not seen those alternatives in the real light that we need to be able to respond to. Next is, if the impacts are considered unavoidable, then can we mitigate where the impact occurs if possible? And this is where discussions around tunnels, around buffering, more planting is really important, because again, we need to hold them to account that there is a best practice standard that should be being applied, and they need to be applying it. And finally, where there will be loss, looking at compensation, and sometimes that can mean habitats away from the site as well. So what we have done is, because all of this is quite complicated, again, you can download these in fact sheets which will talk about planted woodland restoration, etc., and they will sit in the back of your toolkit. So we've made a nice little envelope fold for you, so you can keep all your facts and figures in there. You're going to download all of that for free. And again, that's the piece of paper to be holding when you're having these conversations in forums, when you're responding to consultations. The Woodland Trust is not precious about any of this. Cut and paste away, stick it in your documents. Don't feel you've got to rewrite it. Use it and make it really go to work. We've had some of the best conservationists we can afford on this, so you use it as much as you can. The other thing which Guy was discussing is that there's the Lawton Review, and this basically underpins a lot of the policy that government claims is in place for our forests. So let's hold them to account on this. They need to be applying protection so that we can protect what we've got. They're clearly not doing that, so we want to see where they can protect what we've got. Ideally, they should be reassessing the route, but if not, we've got to look at how we can mitigate. We do need to increase the size of wildlife sites. So where they're doing the compensation and mitigation, this needs to be thought up and clever. It needs to be connected. There needs to be wildlife corridors. We need to know that things work as a natural patchwork so that we can improve the wildlife we've got. They should be making this better, not worse, when they look through the compensation. It's just as important as everything else that the wildlife does not suffer and that the places around us do not become barren, because this is part of our communities and part of our homes. This is why we love the ancient woods, so they've got to keep this in there. This falls into, they should be responsible for creating new sites, and they should be looking at how they reduce the pressure, not increase the pressure on wildlife. And they've just really got to build on work already done. But our biggest problem is, as Guy says, it's the local impacts that they're managing to get away with, because the bigger names like SSIs, etc., it's easy for that to look bad when it's public, so they're hitting a lot of the small cases. So do use your local wildlife trusts, who are a wealth of knowledge, to be able to know what your local sites of significance are, and to make sure that that's in your arguments and your understanding. We also need to make sure that the woods that are going to be in reach, if you like, so we're looking around 200 metres from the track, and what we're saying is at that point there's still going to be impact from noise and vibration, so therefore they need buffering. This is probably with plants and trees and shrubs, as well as looking at other man-made structures so that they build an effective buffer. And each site is going to have to be looked at on its own individual basis. They've got to get out of their offices and start coming up and having a look at what's actually happening on the ground, because different sites will need different sorts of buffering, and they need to work with the landowners to make sure those are in the right places for the right people and the right effect. And at that point, then we will have a good understanding of how they're going to take things forward. But buffering is a really important part of how we're going to stop the additional destruction that will happen once this railway is running, or once the construction is happening, because it's not just about what is destroyed because a rail line goes through it, it's the effect in the long term that we also need to be planning for. So again, we've got 2 downloadable fact sheets off our website to explain how buffering will work. Most importantly, all of this is in our, in much more detail, is in our environmental statement response workshop at 3 o'clock this afternoon with Frances. Frances is one of our senior ecologists, and she's bringing her partner from Nottingham Trent University, who specialises in responding to environmental impact assessments. So if there's not too many of you, you might be able to get some more questions in about other environments as well as ancient woodland, but we will definitely be able to give you a heck of a lot of top tips of how to fight through this process for your ancient woods. This is a picture of the woodland being cleared on High Speed 1 at Ashenbank, which is owned by the Woodland Trust. And what I'm here using this picture for is you will hear a word called translocation being used by High Speed 2. As you can see from this picture, it's pretty destructive. And if you think back to our nice first simple drawing that was drawn for me so that I can understand what we were talking about, undisturbed soils is one of the most vital components of an ancient wood. So when they say they can translocate an ancient wood, which is an entire habitat, it is not possible. There are studies taking place at the moment, but they've only been running 7, 8, 9 years. So though they will refer to that, that is not long enough to see whether that ancient wood has been successfully translocated. There is no evidence at all, and we have had a researcher literally go around the globe looking for evidence to see if there is anything that High Speed 2 can use to prove translocation works. It doesn't. There is no evidence that it works for ancient woodland. Different individual species, yes, there's evidence, but ancient woodland as a whole cannot be translocated. And when you see that kind of work going, you can understand how you can't pick the whole thing up in one massive bucket and gently move it over to the side. It's just not realistic. So, bring you back to our toolkit. Please do take toolkits for you, take toolkits for your communities. We've produced them for free so that you have this information at your fingertips. We will go into further details this afternoon through Frances's workshop, so do attend that if you want to get down some real nitty-gritty. She's going to have a very interactive workshop with you all to be able to really talk through some of the issues that are relating to ancient woodland. You can give us a ring at any time as well, because we have a team of people. We have Catherine here at the front, who is our community lead and has been going out to all the environmental assessment road shows to meet people and to talk to people. We also have Oliver Newham, who is our senior campaigner. Both of them are working on this case. And the reason we do this is because the consistency is really important. When we get to the hybrid bill process, we will take a principled position overarching of why ancient woodland should not be destroyed if exemplar infrastructure is being delivered by our government. But at a local level, your stories and your consistency of why those woods are important is absolutely vital. We will be backing up each other's argument when we get to that point of the hybrid bill. So the consistency of what we give you and the information you can feed back to us, because we are also interested in doing site visits. We also have here Miles, who sat at the front, who as part of his internship is willing to come out and do site visits to take a look at people's sites and be able to do further surveys, so that we can ensure that we have a joined up approach with communities, so that we have a consistent story of what goes forward when this is finally assessed. And finally, I'd like to ask you all to do 2 things today. One, we have an environmental statement session with Frances, as I've mentioned. Make sure a member of your community goes along to that. She will give you the information you need to get really down to the detail. She's willing to go through information in detail with you today. Secondly, come to our stall. We currently have just launched a new campaign that's basically saying the current environmental statement that they've put out for consultation is not up to scratch. We are asking as many people as possible to sign a campaign that is going directly to High Speed 2 Limited to say, this is not up to scratch. You should not have put it out for consultation. We want a full, lengthy and rigorous environmental statement that fills the full 50,000 pages that it should be by the time it gets the hybrid bill. And we want it to be open for consultation on a fair level so that we can all spend the appropriate time and energy to be able to respond to it. We have the right to be able to fight for our environment, and we have the right to be able to say what is right, what isn't right, and what needs putting right.